Well, I didn't start out with ceramics. I actually started out with interior design, but I'd always had an interest in ceramics. My father used to make some as a hobbyist, and he was a teacher, so he had access to school kilns. And I remember one occasion when I was about 6 or 7, I was taken into the kiln room, and I looked through the peephole and I saw the red glowing insides, and I was just intrigued by it. Well, I started with a little hobby kiln and started experimenting. I just made small pieces, not all the way through the process, just to see what the clay would do and what I could get out of it. So after a few years, I suppose, 3 or 4 years of just messing about, I started thinking, well, it's about time I made an actual pot. So I again experimented and decided hand building was what most fascinated me. You could get a great deal of pleasure from just making a piece, holding it and working shape with your hands. I don't have a sketch to set me going. I just have a vague feeling about what I want it to say. And all the opportunities and variations come as I'm making it, as I'm coiling it or pushing it about, or occasionally even dropping it. I'll see something interesting and I'll try and use that to give it character and movement. Well, the clay that I use, because of the kind of forms that I make, has to be very strong as I'm making it and doesn't mind being dried out a bit so that it doesn't slump on me or completely collapse. So I use a fairly heavily grogged stoneware. I start a piece by rolling out a slab, a small slab, and I have a selection of mound forms that I've made. And those mound forms you have several on a single piece, so I can drape the piece of slab clay over a couple of those and mould them round and leave them to dry overnight a bit. As I'm building up the form, I use straps of clay that I just squeeze out rough coils from my lump of clay and then just press it into a strap. It doesn't matter to me particularly whether it's an even strap or not. In fact, it's usually better if it isn't, because as I score the edges and attach the new piece, there'll be quirks from the last strap that I put on. There might be a corner or an edge or something, and as I put on the next one, you get a new form starting to develop. So once the strap is successfully attached, then I use metal kidneys to shape the outside, to lute the new clay into the old, and to try and refine the shape. You can't see it all from one angle. You have to be looking through the pot or underneath it. There are so many curves that have got to tie in and not look forced or artificial. And once I've got the general shape, then I usually use a wooden scraper just to tap the outside so that I can get an even surface going without too many lumps and bumps. Now, the making of the pot can take several days because obviously the clay is soft, and even with a hairdryer to try and stiffen it up a bit sometimes. If you go too far, it'll just collapse on you. So I find it very useful just to get to a point where I can wrap it up in plastic and just let it settle. I usually have 2 or perhaps even 3 pots going at the same time so that I can not only switch from one part of one pot to another, but also switch onto a new pot entirely. So once a piece is finished and I think the shape is right, then I put it into the kiln for a biscuit firing. After that, I can smooth the surface a bit. You're going to get a lot of little nibs of clay and all sorts of bits and pieces. So I give myself a relatively smooth surface. And to that, I paint on a vitreous slip, which is almost always white. Usually I put it back into the kiln and take it up to a higher firing. And then I use just variations in the white of the slip to give a mottled surface, or I might do something much more dramatic and put sweeps of darker slip around it to emphasize the movement that I particularly like in a piece. And when I'm happy, I can put it back into the kiln for its final firing up to 1180. When it comes out of the kiln, I can give it another sanding down, and if it's the right kind of finish that I want, then I can give it a wax polish. I sometimes get asked to describe my work, and it's really very difficult because you say it's organic, and all sorts of images spring to somebody's mind about what organic is. I try to emphasize the fact that it isn't trying to be an interpretation of anything. It's a form on its own. It's a completely abstract, or I attempt to make it a completely abstract form, which relies on movement, line, voids, surface, and balance. Balance is the most important thing, because often with my work they'll be put on tables or plinths or something where you can see all the way around it. So it must work at least most of the way around. I start off with a bag of clay and I finish up with a pot. As I work, I can get completely involved in what I'm making. So it's totally absorbing, and I'm sure it's very good for my wellness.